I was already late for the most important interview of my life, the kind of interview that doesn't just decide your job, it decides your entire future. I had spent the last 3 years struggling through low-paying jobs, barely making ends meet, waiting for one opportunity to finally change everything. And now I had it, an interview at one of the biggest tech companies in the city. This was my one chance, my way out. But that morning, everything was going wrong. My alarm didn't ring, my clothes weren't ready, and the bus I needed was delayed. As I rushed through the crowded streets, constantly checking my watch, my anxiety kept building. I had less than half an hour left, and every second mattered. If I missed this, it was over. As I hurried down the street, I saw an old man sitting on the sidewalk near a small grocery store. His clothes were torn, his face was tired, and his hands were shaking as he held out an empty cup. He looked weak and hungry. "Please, just something to eat," he said softly. I stopped for a moment, my mind racing. Out of all days, why today? I was already late. I should have just kept walking. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made it impossible to ignore him. It wasn't just hunger, it was exhaustion, a deep, quiet kind of pain. I checked my wallet. I didn't have much, just enough to get through the week. Still, I walked into the store and bought a simple sandwich and a bottle of water.
When I handed it to him, he looked surprised.
For a second, he just stared at me, then slowly took it and said, "Thank you, you have a good heart." I gave a small smile, checked my watch again, and my heart dropped. I was now definitely late. I rushed away, my thoughts filled with panic, knowing I had probably just ruined my only chance. By the time I reached the company building, I was 18 minutes late. I stood outside for a moment trying to breathe. The building was massive, full of confident people walking in and out like they belonged there. And then there was me, late, nervous, and completely unsure. I told myself it was over, but I had come too far to turn back.
So I walked inside.
At the reception, I told them about my interview. The receptionist looked at me and said they were already in the panel room but told me to go to the 5th floor anyway. I rushed to the elevator, my hands shaking. When I reached the interview room, I paused, took a deep breath, and knocked. A voice from inside said, "Come in." I opened the door and froze. Sitting in the center of the panel was the same old man I had helped earlier. But now he was dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, clean and confident, completely different from how I had seen him before. My mind couldn't process it. It didn't make sense. He looked at me calmly and said, "Please take a seat." I walked in slowly and sat down, still trying to understand what was happening. The interview started normally with basic questions about my background, education, and experience, but I could barely focus. My thoughts kept going back to him. Then he spoke. "You're late," he said. I apologized, and he asked why. I had the chance to lie, to blame traffic or something else, but I didn't. I told him the truth, that I had stopped to help someone. The room went quiet. He asked, "And that was more important than this interview?" I said yes. There was a long pause, and then the interview continued, but now it felt different. He started asking deeper questions about my values, my choices, and who I really was as a person. At one point, he asked, "What would you do if helping someone cost you your biggest opportunity?" I answered honestly, I would still help them. He asked why, and I said, "Because opportunities can come again, but your character stays with you." He looked at me for a moment and then smiled. After the interview, they asked me to wait outside. I sat there, replaying everything in my mind, especially that moment on the street. Finally, they called me back in. I walked in, my heart pounding. He stood up, looked at me, and said, "You're hired." I couldn't believe it. I reminded him that I was late, but he said, "Do you know how many people came for this job? Over 200. And do you know how many of them would stop to help a stranger knowing they had this interview? None." He paused and then said, "I've built companies, but finding people with real character is rare. You didn't just pass an interview today, you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking." In that moment, everything made sense. I walked out of that building not just with a job, but with a realization that stayed with me forever. Success isn't just about timing or opportunity. It's about who you are when no one is watching. And sometimes, The smallest act of kindness can change your entire life.